You're listening to Today at Museum of the Bible. These exclusive conversations with authors, scholars, and specialists visiting the museum focus on how they are currently engaging with the Bible in their lives and work.
Welcome to Today at Museum of the Bible. I'm Charlotte Clay.
And I'm Jeff Cloa.
And today we are joined by Dr. Stephen Notley. Stephen is the academic director of the El-Araj Excavation Project in Israel. Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So Steve, you were here last January, February, gave an update on the excavations at El-Araj from 2022. So here we are 9 months later, and you've been in the dirt a bit more.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about this last summer?
We excavated for 2 weeks, end of July and the beginning of August. We're functioning now on a sort of a 4-week dig, but we dig in the summer and then we come back and dig in October when the water levels are down. Allows us to dig down a little deeper in terms of the Roman period. But this summer we were excavating. Most of our focus was on the questions related to the Byzantine Church. Trying to answer some questions regarding the walls along the northern side of the basilica. Also, I was tasked with excavating under the apse and places where there were the mosaics had already been destroyed by Crusaders, and so when there were areas that were bare, that's been one of our interesting questions: is what's underneath the church. Are there earlier Roman period, i.e. New Testament period, structures, houses there? We would assume so because they're all around, we find them, so we assume under the church as well. And so we were digging through the apse and then down and finding some interesting structures there, which the archaeologists think they're calling them an ancient walls, which means probably Roman period. No coins have been found yet, no pottery, so we don't, the actual dating of it, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay.
I'll resume that in another week when I'm back starting to dig again for another month. But there seems to be some structures under the apse, so we're interested to see what that is. Usually an apse is the most sacred area in a church, in a basilica. Sometimes you may find relics or various things that identify the tradition of that particular church.
Right.
So to find a structure underneath the apse, and when the identity of the church has been that is a church built over the house of St. Peter. It raises lots of interesting questions.
Yeah.
Again, it's a bit premature to speak with any kind of certainty, but these are the kinds of things that are drawing us into to explore underneath. One of the things that can be said, the archaeologists have always been a bit intrigued at the orientation of the church. It is not on a due east-west,
right,
which you generally do with ancient churches, and they've always been a bit troubled. I guess I'm not as particular. I've always said, but the sun moves during the time of the year. Maybe they were just building it a time of the year when it wasn't exactly true east-west, but that still has bothered them for several years.
How far off is it? I mean, is it a lot or?
No, but just enough to make them
nervous.
Yeah. But what's fascinating is that the basilica is built, if I can say it like this, to align with that structure underneath the apse. So, and one of the things that we surprisingly found towards the end of the season, 2 weeks, as they were digging down along the northern wall, the lengthways of the wall, they came across another wall, long wall that's earlier, which we suspect is an earlier church.
Wow.
And that wall is due east-west. And so if it's found that wall underneath us is an earlier church that was due east-west, and that then they built on top of it another basilica that instead is aligned by, it seems to be intentional,
right.
That's aligned according to this structure under the apse. So lots of interesting questions at this stage. I'd say more questions than answers, but it's intriguing, keeps drawing us in to sort of uncover and find what's there.
Well, you're doing a very good job of not saying what you really think it is, just to cover your tracks here. So.
Because I don't want to have to come back in 6 months when you're interviewing and say, no, I was all wrong.
Right.
So it's, but it's, I mean, one of the things that Moti Aviam, who's the director of the excavation, always states is that archaeology answers questions and then raises new questions. And so you're talking to me midway.
Yeah,
and
halfway through the season.
if I was here in another month, I might be speak with a little bit more certainty, or I might shift and change the. But I would say that what we're finding is fascinating. Fascinating in terms. My area is more. I'm more of a historical geographer, and I function on this project more as an historian. Moti and I work very closely together in terms of trying to understand the historical implications of what the archaeology is uncovering. So I'm intrigued with the impact of what we're finding, how that's going to reshape our understanding of the history of the site. For me, it's a fascinating discipline, a fascinating process.
What's the potential significance of this church, and why would a church be rebuilt over another church in the same location?
Well, I mean, theoretically,
Yeah.
again, understanding all the caveats that I just gave, my suspicion is that the earlier church is part of an early program of building churches. We have testimony and patristic sources, early church fathers. We have a bishop in Cyprus, Epiphanius, who talks about Joseph of Tiberias, who he was a Jewish believer, who's a person of Jewish heritage, who came to faith in Jesus, and but he was there, and he requested from Constantine the emperor permission to build churches, because you didn't really have churches before the Byzantine period. And so he requested the opportunity to build churches, and it speaks about him getting permission to build churches in various places. And that it seems like that church with some others may be part of that program in the 4th century to mark important sites in the Gospels. And it's, that mark where Jesus' ministry takes place. We don't hear about any kind of identification as to, in other words, we don't hear anything about the church being built in the 4th century to mark the house of Peter or the home of Peter. It seems like it's in a more general fashion to identify locations where Jesus' ministry takes place. And so, and it mentions several places. And I think this is part of that program, early Christian expressions of worship at holy locations in the Galilee region, and that then for some reason they decide to build on top of it this large basilica, which may actually go to not the medallion inscription, the one that mentions the chief of the apostles, but the earlier one, or not earlier, but the one that we found the previous season that had been destroyed in the bottom half, and it makes reference, is from in the center of the church, the nave of the church, and it talks about a bishop. Unfortunately, the bottom half is destroyed, so we don't know which bishop it was, but it talks about it, as it ends, the part that is preserved ends. It talks about renovation, and previously we were thinking, okay, this church underwent renovation, but I'm sort of wondering whether the whole church is a renovation, and that some bishop stepped up and decided we need something on a grander scale, larger church, and builds this basilica. Again, it's a bit speculative, but sort of piecing these things together, I wouldn't be surprised to see us find that that is what the reference is in the center of the church. This is something that has been an initiative carried out by a bishop. Again, that we don't know the identity of him, but it's part of this renovating of what was an earlier smaller church, building a larger basilica.
Mm-hmm.
So, in case our listeners have not memorized all of our podcasts, right? What are you hoping to find, or what do you think you have found at the site at El-Araj? That was the original question.
Right. The initial question was the location of Bethsaida, which is a village, Jewish fishing village that's mentioned in the Gospels, the home of Peter, Andrew, and Philip, according to John 1:44. And it's mentioned as place of Jesus' ministry. He's there on several occasions. The feeding of the 5,000 takes place just outside of on the outskirts of Bethsaida. So it is an important place in the ministry of Jesus. And Bethsaida, like most biblical sites, until 150 years ago, was unknown. Most biblical sites, unless there was a continuous population or community living there, like
Right.
Nazareth or Bethlehem or Jerusalem, but most of our biblical sites that we visit on our Holy Land tours, Caesarea, Megiddo, other places, they were destroyed, abandoned, forgotten.
Right.
And we've been in this long process of rediscovery. And, I like to refer to our site as the last lost city of the Gospels. It was the last city that was mentioned, town, village mentioned, that we didn't know its location.
Right.
And there had been an excavation since 1987 of an alternate site that was claimed to be Bethsaida, but I and a few others had questions about it. It didn't seem to fit. Again, I'm a historical geographer, and it didn't fit the descriptions that we find in the written sources, the eyewitnesses, those who actually walked the streets there. And so we began to raise questions, and the more questions were raised, essentially the response was, our site is Bethsaida because it's the only one excavated. And if you think it's someplace else, go dig. And so that's been the process of starting to see, is it or is it not? And I would say that we're in the midst of our 7th season, and I think it's fair to say that nothing that we've unearthed thus far would contradict its identification as Bethsaida. And I would even go so far as to say everything we're finding seems to confirm. It fits the description of those that we know walk the streets. And certain things about its transformation from a village to a city, a polis, renamed Julias, all of the things that we would expect to be finding, we're finding there. So I would say thus far that hypothesis is being confirmed. We're very careful about that. We want to let the follow the science wherever it goes. And I would say to this point, I think both Moti and I are very comfortable in saying that it's a better candidate for the site of Bethsaida-Julias.
I know you found like ancient fishing weights, right?
Yes.
What else? So it was definitely a fishing village. What else did you find that really pointed to being Bethsaida?
Yeah, their fishing weights are there by the hundreds.
Yeah.
And of course, that's one of the other things that makes this a better candidate, that it's right on the lakeshore, as opposed to the other site that's a mile and a half inland, which is not really an ideal site for a fishing village, to be a mile and a half from the water. As I say in Oklahoma, that's where I come from. That's a long way to pull your boat, and but a lot of that, and I would say the first thing that caught everyone's attention in 2017 was the discovery of a Roman bath, which doesn't belong in a Jewish fishing village.
Right.
But Josephus, the Jewish historian of the first century, is clear that Herod Philip, who was the son of Herod the Great, took this village and raised its stature, probably in about 30 AD, CE, which is about the time that Julia, the mother of Tiberius, dies, and that he took this village and transformed it and made it into a city and named it after her.
Yeah.
And so to find those sort of urban elements in a Jewish fishing village
That's amazing.
fits the storyline that we read, the description. We found, again, as you mentioned, lots of weights. We even found fascinating, we found a mold for the making of the fishing weights,
Wow.
lead weights, out of limestone. Very fascinating discoveries. This summer, one of the thing that sort of caught everyone's attention is we're not only digging the church, but we're also excavating first century Roman period homes, first, second, third century. And in one of those homes that clearly is a fishing village, a home of people who are involved in fishing, has stoneware, indicates that it's Jewish
right.
residents there.
Limestone pottery.
Right, like limestone, use of limestone, which is part of the whole kashrut
Sure.
laws in terms of dishes. And in it this summer, we found a inkwell,
Oh, yeah.
which really caught everyone's attention. One, because inkwells are very rare. It's out of pottery, out of earthenware, not stone. And to find them having lasted 2,000 years is quite rare. And two, to find them in a fishing
Right.
home of a fisherman, because the assumption of some New Testament scholars is that Jesus' followers, because they were fishermen, were illiterate.
Right.
Now we find in the home of a fisherman, we find an inkwell, which means there's a measure of literacy there. And that's the fun thing about this excavation, is that we find things that don't fit some of our presumptions about the setting
Right.
of the Gospels, of the New Testament. So so we're in the process of sort of saying, okay, what does that tell us about life there, the individuals who live there? So those types of things give us insights into the stage onto which Jesus stepped.
Yeah.
So when a tour group comes to the site, what would they actually see?
It often
And who would they talk to? Maybe is the
It
first
depends
question.
on when you come.
Okay.
If we're on site, then that's a different dynamic, because you actually have someone there to explain what you're looking at. Most people are not adept to being able to visit a site that's with no explanation.
Right.
So it's good that they'll be there. They'll be able to hear from the archaeologists who are on site. Moti Aviam will be there. I'll be there. Akia Kontavor, who's the field director, be there, and probably divide the group up into smaller groups so we can have explanations, some question and answers. But we'll take them through, show them what's being excavated. By then I will have uncovered the apps, so we'll have some interesting things.
Yeah.
You'll get it
I'm
off the
gonna
wire.
come early and see
That's
before
right.
anybody else.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we'll explain to them what's being uncovered, what are we doing right now, what do we hope to achieve by the end of October, and both in terms of the church and the elements around the church, as well as I'm sure they'll continue in what we call Area D, which is an area of private homes, and they're going to continue to excavate in that, and who knows what they will come up with. They all the time they're coming up with fascinating finds there that tell us something about life there. But we'll break the group up and take them through and show them individually what we're excavating, what we're looking for, why we're excavating here specifically in this spot. We are excavating. We're returning to where we were digging in 2017 to try to uncover more of the Roman bath,
Right.
because that's a very important element of the story of that site. So in this summer they were digging down next to the bath. There's some things that we knew that we left. There's a large structure right next to where the mosaics were found. We don't know exactly what that was. But again, we haven't been back there since 2017, but we're digging there now. Hopefully this autumn we'll be able to uncover more around there and get a better sense as to where the bath was and the nature of it. So there are a number of things for them to see in terms of the ongoing excavation.
Yeah. It's I came with a group there a couple of years ago, and it's not like other sites where you go to Tel Megiddo or you go to Capernaum. There's parking lots, there's pavement, there's crushed gravel, there's signs. This is just like dirt roads and dirt and rocks, and so it's pretty fun.
We're excavating our site is in the middle of a nature preserve, which means everything from, this summer we had serpent, we had black scorpion. We're not allowed to kill anything. Nothing gets killed. It's nature preserve.
They can kill you, but you
everything. That's right. The only thing they allow us to kill are eucalyptus trees. Because they're invasive and they're from Australia, and so that when we've asked them, because sometimes it impedes our work, and they go, please take them. So we'll but it is very, it's certainly not a developed site, and so in some sense people are actually getting to see cutting edge archaeology, and visiting and hearing about things that doubtless in some instances will not even been in the newspapers yet, in the media. So there are things that are coming up out of the ground. So it really is an opportunity to, and of course for us the importance is to understand how the whole process of archaeology works. Why are we digging here? How do we balance this out in terms of what we're finding? How do we decide what to do with a Byzantine church when we know that there's a New Testament village underneath? So how do you deal with that? Every archaeologist has to decide whether they're going to destroy what's on top to get to what's underneath. And so there's a whole process of decision making that goes into it.
And who makes that decision? Is
not me. That's all I say. Not me. So if you're angry,
the archaeologist makes a request, or how does that work? Actually?
No, I think usually the director of the site, in this instance it would be Moti Abiyam, who would decide. He would be very careful, of course. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are portions of the church where the mosaic floors were destroyed by later Crusader occupation. So that's where we go down to see what's underneath. Certainly the church itself is very important historically, so that we wouldn't, you'd never sort of dissemble the church, but we can take opportunities where we can to try to press and say, let's get down to earlier Roman period, 1st, 2nd, 3rd century below. And the goal has always been to try to locate and identify New Testament Bethsaida.
Since we were last here, I know you were on TV sharing a bit about the site. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we were visited the beginning of November last year, which was right at the end of our dig season. And there's a program called Expeditions Unknown, and on the Discovery Channel, and they had made a request to come out and film, particularly focused on the church and the medallion inscription that mentions the chief of the apostles. And so they were out with us for 2 days and filmed, and then it aired in the beginning of June. So they were there. We sort of accommodated them as a little bit of, as I described, as a little bit of Hollywood.
You recovered up the inscription.
And we recovered, covered up the inscription and suddenly uncovered it. We cleared. I think one of the important things is that we were able last autumn to take out all the walls in the church. There were, in a sense, the church was partitioned by later Crusader walls inside, and then archaeological bulks. The earthen walls that archaeologists will use as a grid system when they're doing archaeology. There were a number of those still remaining. We cleared the entire church out so that if you've not seen it since last year, you'll be amazed at the size. Suddenly people were amazed at the size of the church. Even those who excavated last summer, when they came, or a year ago when they came this summer, they were taken back by, you didn't realize how large the church was.
How big is it?
It's about 60 by 70 feet,
Wow.
which is a good
that's a
size,
good
but
size
it
church, yeah.
really strikes you as being large. But we took out most of the walls, but we left a wall to disassemble on camera for the show, and so there was a little bit of that. I mean, we were okay with that because it's. I think it's an important site, and it gave.
Yeah.
They have a viewership of 10 million.
Yeah.
So so it was it was a little bit of, if you've not seen the show, it's sort of entertaining, but it was good, and for me it demonstrates the real interest in the site.
Yeah.
For them to sort of select to come out and film it,
Yeah.
it means that there's actually sincere interest in what we're doing, which always feels good if you're spending weeks on time in the dirt and,
Yeah.
and the heat, that somebody actually is interested in what you're about. And it was good. It was a positive experience.
Very cool.
Well, I could say on the show they were pretty convinced you were right about this being Bethsaida.
They did. I was waiting right to the. He waited till the very end to sort of say. And I thought, oh, he's just going to walk away and not commit. But yeah, no, I think people ask me all the time, are people convinced? And it's very, very rare now for me to encounter anybody who's still undecided. It's I just think the evidence speaks for itself.
I know one person, but I won't name who he is.
It's okay. Those who have dug at the other site, and there's an emotional attachment to it. I know that the other site, some of the team who were with them for a number of years, but I've had more than one experience where I've had. I can think of one New Testament scholar, very well-known scholar, who was not, in 2017, did not think we were on the right site, and sort of made his opinions known. And last November at an annual conference, a scholarly conference, he walked right up to me and said, "You've convinced me." I said, "About what?" And he said, "I'm convinced now that you have Bethsaida." So I just think more and more individuals, if they've actually seriously looked at the information, they've seen that this has a lot more to commend it.
Yeah.
So we haven't found it well, I guess we have sort of found an inscription.
Yeah.
I think for the Byzantine, certainly in the Byzantine period,
they thought it
you
was
have to say this is Bethsaida.
Right.
To find something identifying the church with Peter, and those are quite rare. We in the Byzantine period, very few churches associated with Peter, and usually it's always connected to his showing up in the Gospels. And the only thing up where we are is John 1:44, where Bethsaida is the home of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. So that clearly is understanding of the Byzantines. And the response can be, well, the Byzantines built churches in wrong places sometimes. And to which then my reply is, yes, if it was just a church, I would say you have something there. But the fact that it's on top of earlier Roman period structures
Right.
lends to the credence to the fact that they didn't just create this out of thin air.
Yeah, it's exciting. Well, you'll be back here with Monty in January.
Yes.
To tell us what you found in October.
Yes.
So that lecture will be, I think, January 18th here at the
No,
museum?
25th.
25th. Okay, thank you.
At least that's the date I have on my calendar.
We'll link that as well.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the webpage. And we'll look forward to hearing more about the site.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen.
And thank you for joining us on Today at Museum of the Bible.
Thank you for listening to Today at Museum of the Bible. Join us again to hear how authors, scholars, and leaders are engaging with the Bible every day. Only on Today at Museum of the Bible.